Imagine two of the most powerful empires of the ancient world clashing on the banks of the Nile. On one side, the unstoppable Roman army, and on the other, the ancient civilization of Egypt. The Battle of the Nile in 47 BC was a turning point in history, where political power, military strategy, and betrayal all came together in a dramatic conflict. But who came out on top, and how did this battle change the fate of Egypt forever? Stay tuned to find out. Before we dive into this incredible story of war, betrayal, and power, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an exciting video. Let's get into it. The Battle of the Nile was not just any battle, it was part of a bigger power struggle involving Rome and Egypt. Julius Caesar, one of history's greatest military leaders, had come to Egypt chasing after his defeated rival, Pompey. But once in Egypt, Caesar found himself drawn into a different conflict, a civil war between Queen Cleopatra XII and her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, over control of the Egyptian throne. Caught between these two powerful forces, Caesar's involvement led to a dramatic confrontation that would shape the future of Egypt and strengthen Rome's influence in the region. So, how did it all unfold? Let's rewind the story and explore how these two ancient superpowers came to blows. By 47 BC, Egypt was a wealthy and influential kingdom, ruled by the Ptolemaic dynasty, descendants of Alexander the Great's generals. However, Egypt was in turmoil. Cleopatra and her brother Ptolemy XIII were in a bitter power struggle over the throne, and the country was divided. Cleopatra, known for her intelligence and political skill, sought to regain her power, but her brother's advisors had the upper hand. At the same time, the Roman Republic was also in crisis. Julius Caesar had recently won a civil war against his former ally, Pompey the Great, after a decisive battle at Pharsalus in 48 BC. Pompey fled to Egypt, hoping to find refuge, but Egypt's rulers, eager to gain Caesar's favor, made a fateful mistake. They killed Pompey and presented his head to Caesar when he arrived. This backfired. Caesar was not pleased by Pompey's murder and became deeply involved in Egypt's affairs, which set the stage for the upcoming battle. When Caesar arrived in Egypt, he quickly realized the political tensions in the country. Cleopatra, ever the strategist, knew she needed Caesar's support to regain her throne. In one of the most famous stories of ancient history, Cleopatra had herself smuggled into Caesar's palace, wrapped in a carpet. Once there, she charmed him and gained his support. Cleopatra and Caesar formed an alliance, both politically and romantically. But there was one major obstacle: Ptolemy XIII and his powerful supporters. They were not about to give up the throne without a fight. The tension escalated, and soon, Caesar was drawn into the Egyptian civil war. Caesar and Cleopatra's alliance triggered a massive conflict. Ptolemy XIII's forces laid siege to Alexandria, where Caesar and his small army were based. Trapped and outnumbered, Caesar's situation was dire. The Egyptian army cut off his supplies, hoping to starve him out and force him to surrender. But Caesar was a master tactician. Even though he was heavily outnumbered, he held his position, defending Alexandria with brilliant military maneuvers. He burned part of the Egyptian fleet to prevent them from controlling the seas, and his soldiers fought fiercely to protect their position in the city. Despite Caesar's best efforts, he needed reinforcements. He sent out an urgent call for help to his ally, Mithridates of Pergamum. Mithridates quickly gathered an army and marched to Egypt's aid. With reinforcements on the way, Caesar prepared for the decisive battle that would determine the fate of Egypt. By early 47 BC, the long-awaited reinforcements arrived, and Caesar was ready to take the fight to Ptolemy forces. Caesar led his troops out of Alexandria and confronted Ptolemy's army on the banks of the Nile River. This was the Battle of the Nile, a showdown between Caesar's Roman legions and Ptolemy's Egyptian forces. Ptolemy XIII's army was large, consisting of Egyptian soldiers, mercenaries, cavalry, and war chariots. But Caesar's army, though smaller, was far more experienced and well-disciplined. The Egyptians took up positions along the Nile, thinking they could use the river to their advantage, but Caesar had other plans. In a bold move, Caesar split his forces. While one group attacked from the front, another flanked the Egyptians from the side, catching them off guard. This tactic caused confusion and chaos in the Egyptian ranks. Caesar's legions pressed the attack, and the Egyptians were forced to retreat towards the river. As the Egyptians fled towards the Nile, disaster struck for Ptolemy XIII. In the chaos of the retreat, Ptolemy attempted to escape by boat, but his vessel capsized. Ptolemy, only a teenager at the time, drowned in the Nile, marking the end of his reign in a tragic turn of events. With Ptolemy's death, the Egyptian forces collapsed. Caesar's victory was complete, and Cleopatra was restored to the throne. Although Egypt technically remained an independent kingdom, Cleopatra's reign became heavily influenced by Rome. Caesar left her in power alongside her younger brother, Ptolemy XIV, but it was clear that Rome had gained significant control over Egypt's future. After the Battle of the Nile, Cleopatra's position as queen was secure, but Egypt's independence was becoming more symbolic than real. While Cleopatra would go on to rule for several more years and form a legendary relationship with Mark Antony, Egypt's fate was increasingly tied to Rome. For Julius Caesar, the victory in Egypt only enhanced his reputation as a brilliant commander and leader. He stayed in Egypt for a time, enjoying the luxury and intrigue of Cleopatra's court. However, his time in Egypt was short, as he had to return to Rome to address other issues. His involvement with Cleopatra would later have far-reaching consequences, not only for Egypt but for Rome as well. The Battle of the Nile in 47 BC was a pivotal moment in ancient history. It was more than just a military victory for Caesar, it solidified Rome's influence over Egypt and set the stage for future events. Cleopatra, despite her ambitions, became increasingly dependent on Rome, and her reign would be shaped by her relationships with powerful Roman leaders. The battle also demonstrated Caesar's skill as a military commander. Despite being outnumbered and in a foreign land, he used clever tactics to outmaneuver the larger Egyptian forces. His victory over Ptolemy XIII was not just a win for him personally but also a sign of Rome's growing dominance in the Mediterranean world. For Cleopatra, the battle was a triumph that restored her to power, but it also marked the beginning of the end for the Ptolemaic dynasty. Egypt's independence was slipping away, and within a few decades, it would be fully absorbed into the Roman Empire after the famous Battle of Actium in 31 BC. The Battle of the Nile was more than a military clash, it was a turning point in the history of two great civilizations. It determined the future of Egypt, cemented Julius Caesar's status as one of Rome's greatest leaders, and changed the course of history. Cleopatra's rule and her legendary relationships with Caesar and later Mark Antony would become the stuff of legend. But in the end, the battle foreshadowed the downfall of the Ptolemaic dynasty and the ultimate annexation of Egypt by Rome. That wraps up the story of the Battle of the Nile, where Rome and Egypt faced off in a fight that changed the ancient world. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more amazing historical stories. And don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.